Okay.
We're on. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the second edition of the Mark Levitt Show. He came here about a month ago, and we introduced his first book in the trilogy called Enlightenment, Behind the Scenes, in which he talks about his experience of awakening or enlightenment. Now, I think, well, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think today he's here to talk more about what's in book 2 of the trilogy. And as he said earlier, before we started the recording, the third book has yet to come out. But this book, and I'm in the middle of it, I can see where my bookmark is. It's great. It's called Being While Knowing That You Are Not. And I take it this is a more like hands-on, practical, how-to type of thing. So let's get right to it. And Mark, over to you. And thanks for coming.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. The first thing that I thought about after the topic came up of writing a how-to was to just simply reflect back on my path of things that I did how-to. So as soon as I was done with the meeting and I got the idea, I just went back through the books and just quickly jotted down all the things that were things that I did that I consider the how-to. And then after that, it's just easy to tell it in story form because, it's a progressive thing. It's an evolutionary thing. As we pick up, as we evolve, our practice evolves. But the main thing I noticed when I was going through my books, looking for practices, skimming and looking for practices, was that the main practice that I use is not necessarily a practice in the sense of something that you pick up and you put down, you sit down, you meditate, you pick up a book or you put it down. Most of my practice is practice that's integrated into your life, that's lived from the very center, something that's not something that you pick up and put down, but as you go into the world, the practice is interacting with the world. So most of the stuff that I have to share, not so much on exercises or techniques in a standard sense, but there's already tons of good books on those things with actual techniques and practices that you pick up and put down. Most of what I've realized I have to share is something that more comes from the very center of who you are and your approach to life and your actual very orientation to life, almost like your physical position to life. Within it, there are going to be some practices and some exercises and things that you could pick up and put down. But for the most part, it's a mindset, just a physical orientation, a perspective in which you're interacting with the world with. So the first thing that I realized when I was writing this list out is there's a conundrum I noticed from the very beginning, because the actual practice that I'd have to share. So if I was talking to you and I'd say, and you just wanted to know what's the practice I could share, it's really only 2 steps. But before you get to those 2 steps, there's 3 pre-steps that you have to do just with preparing yourself even before you start those 2 steps. Otherwise, nothing's going to work. So
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Hey, Mark, can I interrupt before we get to the 3 pre-steps
Yes.
and the 2 steps? I'm getting messages in my private chat saying, and I noticed there are, more people here now than there were last week. And one person saying, for those of us who are very new, can Mark spend just 5 minutes, going over the first book to try to kind of bring everybody up to stuff now? I didn't think about that, but I do see there are many more people here today than a month ago. So
no problem. I'll do that now. Thank you, Gary. I'll do that. All right. My name is Mark Levitt. And from 1999, from 2002, I was an very intense spiritual seeker in the sense that that's all I wanted. What's unique about my book is that at the time that this was going on is I had a wife and a very young daughter. So I was very much into, being a very new family person, being our only daughter. So basically, the book was intended to serve as, I guess, maybe inspiration to everyday working people, that you don't have to go to India, you don't have to, give up your life, you don't have to be a monk or anything. Anybody in whatever course of life, you can look for your ultimate truth, your ultimate identification of who you are. So in the book, so there's two things. One, as I said, the book is just about a normal person who didn't have any background in any particular spiritual teaching. Oops, sorry about that. Let me shut that down. All right. Oops, sorry. Let me get back. Okay. So the book is also about the kind of a non-traditional approach that I took, in the sense that it wasn't a particular school, it wasn't a teacher. I was really heavily reliant on practical experiences, engaged practices, going to the Monroe Institute or using, sound technology, Zen practice. Everything that I was into was very hands-on. I was very experience oriented in my approach to spirituality. And as a result of that, I started to have experiences, non-ordinary experiences that I couldn't explain. Things that would put the whole world into a higher perspective. Well, that actually put, that put the world into a higher perspective. That maybe, but it didn't show me anything. I had to figure everything out on my own. So these visions and all these experiences that we're getting, these non-ordinary experiences, were just confusing to me because it was showing me a bigger picture of the world that I didn't understand. So I had to figure everything out for myself. And I don't want to ruin the, the progress of the story. But basically the first book just goes through a couple of things. One, my intense dedication towards finding my own truth and doing it with a family, and then trying these non-traditional approaches, which resulted in non-ordinary experiences, which I had to figure out for myself because I didn't have a teacher or a path to go on. But the specifics, I'll let you find out for yourself. You think that's enough to catch them up, Gary? Okay, all right, good deal. All right, so where were we? So, okay, so I was getting to the conundrum. So basically what I realized is there is a conundrum for what I'm about to share. Because like I said, there's basically only 2 steps to the practice, but before that, there's a strength that you have to have. There's a preparation for those 2 tests. And that's basically finding your strength, but then how do you find your strength without the practice? So it's kind of a conundrum, and I'm just going to say I acknowledge the conundrum, but obviously the audience that I'm talking to is obviously, already familiar with this and has already gotten a certain amount of strength. So it'll be easier for this particular audience to get this. So anyway, so before I go on to the 2 practices, I want to touch on the 3 qualities that you have to harness before you even begin the practice. And one more thing I want to say about this with the spiritual practice is I compare it to losing weight, in the sense that if you were to ask anybody, any scientist, any professional, how to lose weight, they're going to tell you 2 things. Number one, the how to do it is going to be the easiest instructions possible, simply taking less calories than what you expend. But the implementation of that advice is going to be the hardest thing ever. So that's the same thing with what I'm telling you now. The advice that I'm going to give you is just to give you the simplest thing. Just, simply be quiet, be still, very simple instructions, but the practical application of those instructions is going to be the hardest thing you've ever had to do, which is why I talk about the preparation before you even get to the practice, which I don't even have to tell you. Any practice is going to be based on some form of stillness, silence, or something unchanging. So before we get to the practice, we'll get onto those 3 qualities that I'm talking about. And the first quality before you take any steps onto the thing is just to develop something that I call honesty with yourself, a brutal honesty with yourself. Not necessarily a brutal honesty with other people, but just a brutal honesty with yourself that you start with. That number one, you have to decide, is this something that I even really want? Because with this, you have to be one pointed. It has to be the only thing that you want. It's not the type of thing that you could be working on this and other things in life, because what this is counterintuitive to those other things in life. So if you really commit to finding out who you are and finding out the ultimate truth, it really has to be the only thing, your only goal, because you're going to find it's going to run counterintuitive to every other goal and every other aspiration you may have in life. So that's why the very first thing is just to sit down with yourself and just ask, is this something that I even really want? And with that brutal honesty, once you start with that brutal honesty, you could look at your life and you could acknowledge that I am doing what I want in my life. Everything that I'm doing in my life is what I want, because you could say you want X, Y, and Z and all these different things in life, but the bottom line is what you're doing, what you're actually doing is what you want enough to actually do it. So you may want 10 things, but there's only one thing that you want enough to actually do it. And that's what I'm talking about. You have to really know, and that's where the brutal self-honesty comes into, make sure that number one, is this something that I really want? So the number one thing is just to establish a sense of brutal honesty with yourself. You're by yourself all the time. No one's watching. It's only you. You're not fooling anyone but you. So the first thing is just being comfortable with you and being so open that you're watching yourself and you're noticing any tinges of anything that's not self-honesty, a brutal self-honesty. All right. So then the second thing is to be spontaneous and not to be attached to any rules. Whatever things you come up with, whatever rules, whatever idioms, whatever isms you come up with, none of them are to be attached to. Whatever wisdom you found, none of the wisdoms to be attached to. Anything that I'm telling you today is not to be attached to. It's meant to be taken spontaneously as it resonates with you. That's when it's a truism for you. So one thing I encourage you to do before you do anything is to examine all the truisms that you have found on this path. The organizer of this course, I apologize for forgetting your name, but he sent me a wonderful list of all these truisms that people assume about spirituality. So I would spend some time just examining these things and just see which ones you find to be true for you, because you're not going to be there's hundreds of us. There's not all of us are going to resonate with the same truisms. And the only thing that matters is what's resonating in the moment. So that's why I say the most important thing is just to be spontaneous, not to be fixed, not to take any ideas and take them as ideologies or isms. It's about being spontaneous, brutally self-honest, and just knowing, trusting yourself and trusting the aware space that already is. So we have brutal self-honesty, being spontaneous. And then the third thing is just once you get to that point that you know what this is what you want, you're brutally self-honest with yourself, you know you're not going to be attached, then you establish this as your main agenda. You have to establish, all right, I've made a commitment to myself. And what I call it is the big picture. When you're going through life, all the things in life, whether you're at work, whether you're with your family or anywhere you're at, that's like the little picture is what you're seeing. The big picture is to remember who you really are and what this really is, which is, I like to think of as death. You were death before you were here, and you're going to be death once this is done. So that's the big picture. That's the only thing that stays, is who you are before you came here and who you are when this is done. So the third thing is to establish the agenda that your focus in life is going to be on the big picture, not on the little picture. So when all these things come up with life, trivial issues at work or whatever, everything is seen through the lens of it's the big picture. I'm in the big picture and I'm seeing through the lens of the big picture. Because then it brings you back to a perspective of what you're really living. You're not mistaking yourself to be a little person amongst other people in the world. You're remembering the big picture, that I was here before I'm Mark and I'm going to be here after I'm Mark. And I need to focus on the big picture of what I should be doing here while I appear to be Mark. So those are the three things. Just remember that. Brutal self-honesty, being self-honest, and then finally just really establishing that you know you've made a commitment, so you can always come back to this. And the reason I say that is because the playground is going to be in life, or the battlefield, whatever you call it, the playground, the battlefield, where you actually practice spirituality. It's going to be in life. It's going to be with your boss. It's going to be with the people at the grocery store. It's going to be in line. So it's always important to remember the big picture. You're always remembering the big picture, no matter where you are. It's not something where you read a book and then you go to the world, you have squabbles, and then you come back and you try to read the books to try to deal with the squabbles. No, when you're in work, that's the reality. That's when you're practicing. So it's always important to remember the big picture, no matter where you're at. And those are the three things I'm saying. You can't do anything until you establish a brutal self-honesty within yourself, being spontaneous, not being attached to any type of teaching or wisdom, whatever piece of wisdom that you picked up along the way. You can't even be attached to that. And then the third thing is, like I said, just establishing that you've created a new life and you're operating in a new agenda. And that's there to remind you anytime you're in a situation, who you are and why you're here. All right. So once you establish those three things, the next thing I came to in my book was what I called the last desire. The last desire for me was when I came to become so sick of myself and so sick of my desires that I just did not want to desire anything anymore. And prior to that, all of my desires were all spiritually related. So when I'm saying I was sick of desiring, I'm not talking about I was sick of desiring toys or cars or anything like that. I was sick of desiring peace. I was sick of desiring quiet, sick of desiring enlightenment, or sick of desiring anything that wasn't already was. So when I'm saying I came to the point of my last desire, I'm not talking about worldly sensory desires. I'm talking about the desire to have anything that's not already there, to be anything that you already are not. I got so sick of that, so I just wanted to have no more desires. And as I was saying this, I'm realizing this is a desire itself. What I'm expressing is a desire. But I was fine with that. I acknowledged, okay, you're right. This is part of the brutal honesty. You're right. This is a desire, but it is my last desire. My last desire is I just don't want to have any more desires. And that brutal honesty with yourself sets it up that you know that what you're having is a desire to desire nothing. All right, so this is when we come to surrendering. And that's why I'm saying all the practices can be summarized by surrendering. So in order to get to the point that you surrender, it can't be something that somebody tells you you have to surrender, because it's not going to be a true surrender. The true surrender has to become from a point that you see it yourself. You recognize it yourself. You've tried yourself. You've been out there. You've tried this way. You've tried that way. You've tried all the infinite ways. And the only reason you surrender is because you honestly saw that you can't do it. You're giving up. Like I used to call it as being as helpless as Jesus on the cross, or as hopeless as Buddha under the tree. When Buddha finally gave up under the tree, when you finally just give up and say, I can't do it. Whatever you're trying to do, it's not going to work. And I've come up with an idea of what I mean by that. This is the way I've come to perceive in the world we live in with all the people. The way I see the world now is there's infinite possibilities of what is the right way to do things. And all of us are here thinking that we found the right way to do things. And not only are we finding out the right way to do things, then we want to tell other people the right way to do things. You're not doing it right. This is the way you should be doing it. And other people are saying, no, you're not doing it right. This is the way you should be doing it. And that's all life is an infinite possibilities of how to do this thing that we call life. And all life is a process of a million people saying, this is the way you do it. No, this is the way you do it. This is the way you do it. This is the way you do it. And that's all it is. Whether, no, it's, you should be focusing on art. Don't worry about money, just focus on art. Or no, you should be focusing on love. Or no, you should be balanced. There should be a focus on all these things, and just realize everyone is on their own unique path with an infinite million things. And you're never going to be able to convince anybody of your wisdom. You're never going to truly be able to appreciate anybody else's wisdom. You're never going to understand the wisdom behind anybody else's eyes. You're only going to understand yours. So it's easy to give up once you just realize everyone's out there with their own opinions. Everyone's as right as I think I am. All those other people think that they're just as right as I am. And so the analogy that I like to use when talking about that dynamic with people is you could take anything as an example, like let's say alcohol, how much you drink or how much let's just take that for an example, because I got a perfect analogy for that. So what is the right amount to drink alcohol? And the joke is, or how much is it okay to drink before you're not alcoholic? And the punchline is, if you drink one more beer than your doctor drinks, that's when you're an alcoholic. And the point of that joke is you could talk to some people and say, oh, okay, 7 beers a week and anything above that, that's too much. You could talk to somebody else and say, oh, anything over 14 beers, then you're doing that too much. You could talk to other people and say anything more than a beer a week. It's whatever they're at, anything going above their thing, then it becomes problematic. So once you see that in the world, that no one's got it, no one understands you, no one's going to be able to get behind you and tell you what's the right thing for you, it makes it easier to drop that struggle of trying to do the right thing according to other people. And the final thing I want to say about that is what I keep coming down to is like the end of the movie War Games. The end of the movie War Games was talking about something like I'm talking about, all these infinite programs of trying to figure out the right configuration to win the game. And so that's what the War Games was. It was trying to figure out this computer simulation so we could beat Russia in a nuclear war. That simulation didn't work out. That simulation didn't work out. So there's all these infinite simulations of trying to figure out the right way to do it, the right way to win, the right way to come out on top, the right way to be a winner. And the punchline to the War Games was the only way to win was to not play at all. That's the joke. So the minute you enter your toe into the water, the minute you put your finger into the ripple of trying to tell the world what to do or to try to enter anything, now you're entering to the world of problems. Now you're just a part of it. Now you're just one more thing of saying, this is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. So for me, it all comes down to just coming down to like the end of War Games, when you realize there is no right way. There is no thing that you could say that's a one-off, that's a perfect way to do things. The only truly way to win is to just not play at all. Just stop, just surrender and don't even try. So, okay, and now that's it. So that's what I wanted to set the table with, is when I keep talking about surrender, it should not be something like directions that I'm giving you saying you need to surrender. It has to come from the very center. It has to come from your experience that I've tried, and I could see the the ridiculousness of me of trying. No matter what I try, it's going to end in failure. So I'm just going to truly give up. And when you truly give up, bam, that's where the practice begins. And now we can start to actually talk about those two things. Okay. So for me, the deepest thing that I've ever heard, and that could be just the religion for me, the one sentence or even a paragraph that I've ever heard is just a paragraph by Bodhidharma. And I'll read it to you. He says, people of this world are deluded. They're always longing for something, always in a word seeking, but the wise wake up. And then this is the part, this is the only thing that I have as my religion. This is my only religion. The next line is, they fix their minds on the sublime and they let their bodies change with the seasons. So now I want to get back to my share screen thing. Let me go into share screen, go into here, share screen. All right. So now you're seeing what I'm seeing. Okay. So basically what I just read to you, now I'm going to read that to you again. But first of all, can everybody see my picture? Thumbs up if you see my picture. Okay, cool. All right. Thank you. All right. So, okay. They fix their minds, and I'll use my cursor as my finger here so you can see where I'm looking. So they fix their minds on the sublime and they let their bodies change with the seasons. So, okay, so now let me go back so you can see me. All right, stop share. All right, so now you can see me again. Okay, so that takes us to the actual practice. So when I hear those words, fix your mind on the sublime and allow your body to change with the seasons, that brings me back to my discovery that we have a half of our lives that we're not paying any attention to. We have a whole second half of our life that we're just not paying attention to. But the more we get to know that second half of our life, that bottom part, that void, that invisible part, the part that's behind us, the more we get to know that part, the more we're going to get to know who we are and that we can't allow the body to change with the seasons. And we see that we are the space for the body to change with the seasons out there. So everything that I'm going to talk about today, there's two practices, is getting to know that other part of yourself that's already there. And I think that's the most important thing to point out, is that this is not going to be something new that you're bringing to you. It's something that's already there. So, let me just leave this up permanently, this share thing. Yeah. So basically, there's nothing new to bring to your mind. It's already there. You are already living from the void and then watching your body change with the seasons. That's already happening. So we're not talking about bringing anything new to the conversation. We're not talking about bringing anything new to your experience. We're just talking about bringing your attention to something that is already there. So the two steps that I'm going to talk about, the first step is just finding the address. So there's two steps. One, finding out who you really are, and then two is cultivating it. So the very first step is just finding what I call the address. Just having an experience, having something that you know what you really are, which is down here, the void. So anyone that's experienced silence or stillness knows what they really are. And then you see the changing things that are happening in front of you. So you could already see that you are the stillness, watching the things that are changing. And so the only practice is to cultivate presence in into what you actually already are. And so now let me stop the share and go back to regular thing. And I want to talk about the cultivation part. So basically what I'm trying to say is there's only two practices. One, discover presence and awareness, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to call it yourself, whether you want to call it silence, your Buddha nature, whatever word. And this is what I'm talking about, the brutal self-honesty and being spontaneous. You have to find your own word, whatever word resonates with you. That has to be just the word that you use. You can't, it has to be coming from your heart all the time. It has to always be spontaneous. So it has to be something that you're experiencing and not somebody else's word that you're using. So number one thing is to find the address, find your silence, find your center. And then the second practice is just simply to cultivate it. But I want to talk about the cultivating part, the second part, which is not to hold on to it. A lot of times when you talk about practicing, it sounds like you're trying to hold on to something. So you attain a particular state and now you're trying to hold on to that state. But it's not that. When I'm talking about cultivation, I'm not trying to talk about holding on to a particular state or a particular feeling. I'm trying to talk about cultivating presence and awareness so you get used to being who you are, which is just the space for all these things. So you're not attaching to any feeling, you're not attaching to any state. You're cultivating presence and being the space for these states that come and go. So it's a real delicate line when I'm talking about cultivating, because cultivating is practicing. It is it's an effort to maintain, something, but it's only an effort to maintain something that's already there. Happiness comes and goes. Peace comes and goes, but what you already are doesn't come and go. So one thing I want to point out that I've noticed this week when I was coming up with all these different practices is that with all these practices, the reason if people tell you to practice silence, people to tell you to practice stillness, or people to tell you to practice the power of now, the reason that all of these practices work is the one thing they have in common is that they're all pointing you back to the unchanging. That is the important part. So if you look at that circle that I created before, there's two aspects to us that we have. We have the changing part of our lives, which is in front of us, and we have the unchanging part, which is back here. So the changing part is constantly moving, it's constantly moving, and we're watching that moving, so it's easy to associate that yourself with that moving so much that you think you are that moving, but the truth is that you're always down here. You're always in the unchanging part, watching the changing. So really, the only practice that I'm telling you, that I'm encouraging you to do, is to cultivate as much time as you have in the unchanging part, so you come to identify with yourself as the unchanging, watching the changing part that's out there. And now I want to come to the next part, and this is the part. Now I want to come to the part where why we had to set up those three parts. So if you're wondering why, if the only instruction is to find that stillness within yourself is part one, and then number two is stay there, cultivate it. Those are the only two practices. Discover what stillness or unchanging is, practice number one, step number one, and step two is stay there, cultivate it. That's it. Those are the only two things I can tell you. And they're really only one thing, to be honest with you. But the reason that I had to give you that long preamble before the simple practice of just find stillness and then sit there is because now we get to what I called in the book, the suicide mission. Once you really get excited and you hone in, let's say you have an experience like, oh my God, the stillness, I get it. I get the excitement about the stillness and the unchanging. That's the truth. That's who I am. I really resonate with this. Now I just want to spend all my life spending as much time as I can in this stillness and the silence, and just cultivate that and be that, and come to identify with that, that's who I really am. When you start to do that, it is going to be the hardest thing that you've ever done. And that's why I gave the analogy of losing weight. It's simple instructions, lose calories, exercise, but the execution of it is the hardest thing. Same thing with this, to sit by yourself in silence and stillness is akin to killing yourself. And that's why I called it the suicide mission. When you begin this practice, it really feels like you're suffocating yourself, because it's let's just say it's killing your ego, for the lack of a better word. It's killing your sense of self. It's killing that sense of I want to do this or I want to do that. You have something in you that always wants to say, I'm doing this, I feel that, I'm getting this, or I'm doing that, I. And the more you sit in that stillness and identify with that, as opposed to the stillness part, it's going to feel like you're suffocating yourself. You're going to want to feel like you want to come out of the silence and stillness, and you want to come back to yourself so you could think about all that stillness and that stuff that just happened. So when you're, and by the way, this is in two places. This is not just on your sitting cushion. This is going to work, probably be more than two ways, but I'll just tell you two ways. Number one, it's going to be on your sitting cushion when you're actually practicing stillness and silence. It's going to get uncomfortable. You're going to want to think, you're going to want to come out of your mind, and it's going to feel like this is smothering. And then also in the world, when you go into the world, and like I said, when you have issues with, your boss or people at work, to always remember that you're playing the higher agenda, that you're playing a bigger game than whatever the game is that's going on earth. Once again, it feels like suffocating because you're not going to get your way. Your boss is going to get the way. The lady at work is going to get the way. Everyone else is going to get their way, but you, because now you're bending. You're not here to stick up for you and to look up for your best thing. You're just here as a witness watching things. So once again, that suffocating feeling is going to come up for you as, well, what about me? Why don't I get this? I want to stick up for myself. And then it just comes back to that agenda. No, I'm here. I'm picking up a bigger agenda. I'm looking at the bigger picture. I'm trying to accomplish something for my, soul or self, for the lack of a better word, that transcends these little tiny things, issues that are coming up one at a time on earth. I'm working on something bigger. So I'm going to bend, I'm going to yield, I'm going to be open, and that is going to feel like you're dying because you're used to getting your way. You're used to standing up for yourself. So the reason I say you have to start with those three things before you begin the practice is because the practice is going to feel like you're killing yourself. That's why I called it the suicide mission. It really feels like you're having to take a pillow and suffocate your own self. So, another thing I wrote down is that the reason I said it felt like a suicide mission is because when you do get far enough in the path, you do realize that awareness of awareness does, what's the word I'm saying, emasculate your existence. It emasculates you. It ruins any sense of you being a you. When you really start to look at who you are and you start to look at your mind and space, it really does start to emasculate that sense of being for you. So now I want to actually give you two practices that we could actually do that I used when I was killing myself or practicing the suicide mission. And it came spontaneously. So as I'm living my life, as I just now started this new agenda in life, where I just realized, so I had this epiphany, I'm starting this new agenda. I'm not going to no longer, try to build myself up in life, trying to better myself, trying to make myself stronger, healthier, better, and all these different things. Instead, I just want to have that I don't want to desire anything. I just want to give up everything, give up my whole life, complete surrender. Once I did that, that's when I would start to feel those feelings like I was killing myself, like I was suffocating myself. So it would start to, it would manifest as my mind, every time I would hear myself in my internal dialogue, I think this, or I think that. It didn't matter what happened after that. I was just getting so sick of anything that began with, I feel this way, or I think that I came up with a practice where I said, okay, mind, you could do whatever you want. You could think whatever you want. You could protect yourself, whatever you want. You could build whatever you want. You could do whatever you want. You could do anything you want, but no words. So I allowed my mind to balk at the practice as much as it wanted to. It could leap up, it could fight, it could scream, it could do whatever it wanted, but it could not use any words. So now I'm watching my mind, I'm here, I'm watching what comes up in my mind, and any resistance, any bad feelings that come up, I'm allowing it, but just no words. And that's a way to where you could feel like you're suffocating yourself, but you're still allowing air to come in. So you're able to do both things at the same time. You're still suffocating yourself by saying, I'm not allowing myself to go down the ego road of building myself and creating myself and making myself bigger, but it's not going to come through in words. So go ahead, mind, do your very best, feel what you ever want, feel resistance, feel whatever, but just no words. So that was one practice that I think will be helpful for you guys. Another practice that I came up with, I know I've said before and I've made a video of this, but I thought I'd do it again here since there's new people, is to notice that in your mind, as you're having all these thoughts, each thought that you're having about yourself is building a sense of a real person. So now let me go back to share screen. All right, so now I'm gonna go back to share screen. Right? Okay, so now as you go through in your, oh, wait a second. Wait, oh, I just realized. I should be, this is the way I share screen. All right, never mind. So I don't do share screen, I just do this. All right, forget that. All right, so as you go through life and as you're noticing your thoughts, you're going to notice that if you allow your thoughts to build, the thoughts are going to marry each other and they're going to start to build a structure that appears to be something that is not there. So let's say you start to have your self-assault saying, oh, I really don't like it when I feel this way. That's like a leg. Then if you allow the thought, yeah, I know, because this guy feels this way and I really like that. Now it goes to something else. Then you could say, oh, I know, because when I do that, I really feel like this. Now, yes, I know. In each thought, you're building a person. So what the practice is just to notice that you're building the person as you're building it. So before it even gets to the point of a stick person, you dissolve it. You start back over. So instead of it getting all the way to the point of a person, it's going to look like this. Oh yeah, I really like it when this person does that. Yeah, but I really don't like it when this happens. Oh shoot, I noticed I'm doing that. I'm stopping. And you keep doing that in your life, and it's never going to get to the point where it builds a complete person. So basically, what I'm saying is it's fine to have thoughts in life. You're going to have thoughts in your life, and your life is going to move. But just notice those thoughts as they're building, and just when it starts to get to a point that you notice, oh wow, I've had 6 or 7 of these, just dissolve it and let it start back over. And that's what I mean about like the suicide mission, not letting it get to the point that you're having all these thoughts that are building, because what's going to happen is it's going to get to the point where it's going to get like this. It's going to have details and eyes and a nose and hair and clothes and all this stuff. And you got like a real person there that's, impossible to dissolve. So watch yourself continually as you're seeing yourself, build yourself as the person. It's happening with one thought at a time. And so if you notice that, you say, oh my God, it's already starting to get in there. I'm already starting to believe that it's a person. And you delete it. And it's going to happen again. And it's going to keep happening. And your whole life is just going to be this little stick man constantly building itself in your mind. And your job is just to always remind yourself, no, I'm on an agenda of silence. I'm sticking with silence, kill the man, and just let it dissolve. But it's never going to go away. It's always going to constantly build there, but it's never going to develop, like I said, into a full-fledged thing where it's got dots and eyes. And, most people are walking around with the things full-flooded with colors and sequins and little dots and, high definition. But the whole point of this is to say, it's okay. Thoughts are going to be natural. Identification is going to be natural. Just don't follow them and let them attach and build to something that's actual. Notice it as it's happening and drop it. You got a leg, drop it. You got an egg, then an arm, and you're really into the thought and a body, then drop it. But at some point you could always drop it and then let it start building again. And that's the part that I was talking about that feels like a suicide mission, because it feels like you're killing yourself. It feels like you're suffocating yourself, because you are the person that's always building, always the person that's building and maintaining. And when you give up on that, it's going to feel like death. It's going to feel like suffocation, which is why I said those 3 things are more important than the practice itself. Because remember, the practice itself is just 2 steps: finding out who you are and then cultivating it. Or let's not say finding out who you are, coming to know silence, stillness, coming to know the unchanging, and then cultivating it. So that right there, that's it. Any spiritual teacher in the history of time, anything he's ever taught is only effective because he's pointing you towards the changeless, the unchanging. Any teaching that's ever been effective, whether it's the power of now, whether it's silence or stillness or pointing back to you who you really are, the one thing all these things have in common, the reason they work, the reason they're effective, is they're pointing you to the unchanging. So the more you get to know the unchanging, the more you're actually practicing getting to know yourself, because this is who you are. You are the void watching your body and everything else that's up in the world. So all the practice is getting to know who you really are, which is, like I said, it feels like death, and it's going to have to feel like death, which is why I say the most important thing is to practice those three qualities of, number one, being brutally self-honest with yourself, two, not attaching to any particular teaching, and three, setting surrendering as your agenda. Now, I want to go back. I just want to tell a quick story before we switch subjects here about why it's important to not attach to a particular teaching, and why it's important to not make this an ism or to just make it a rule. You have to be spontaneous. You have to know that it's not a rule. It has to be spontaneous. It has to come from your heart. It has to be real. Okay, so now I want to tell you a little story that just happened this month, and that's why it's in my head, because it's recent. So my wife had an issue with her boss. So she was asking me, how to help her with her issue. And basically it was a binary situation to where she only could respond in two different ways. And so when I looked at the situation, I said, well, there's only two things. Either this is, that's another thing too, is I look at everything as a lesson. The big agenda, I'm sorry, when I'm saying look at everything as the big agenda, the big picture, I see everything as a big lesson. We're here to learn. That's the big thing. You're not here to get your way with your boss. You're not here to get first in line. You're here to learn things on a big level. And learning things means you're not going to get your way at work. You're not going to get your way at the grocery store. So that's what I mean about the big agenda. So, all right, sorry for that distraction. Let me come back to that. All right. So her situation is going to require one of two things. Okay, that's it. So I see everything as lessons. So in this situation, I realize there's two lessons that are possibly going to happen. Either this lesson for you is surrendering, which means you should just bend to your boss and be like, okay, I'm on a bigger thing and you do whatever. Or in her situation, this it could have been a lesson where she needed to expand her boundaries and go beyond her comfort zone of establishing her boundaries. In other words, this may not be a situation to where it's about surrendering. This may be a situation where you have to find your own courage and establish your boundaries with someone else and establish your own integrity, which is really hard for some people because it's going outside your comfort zone. Anything that's going outside your comfort zone, anything that's making you uncomfortable, that's a good thing. It's what you want. It's exercising. So if this were to just be an ism or an ideology of saying everything's surrender, then you really wouldn't be self-honest with yourself. You really wouldn't be spontaneous. You would say, okay, it's simple, it's arithmetic. My boss wants me to do this thing. I'm practicing surrendering. So nope, I'm just gonna do whatever she says. But that's not what I'm saying. You can't be attached to anything. You can't even be attached to the idea of surrendering. Everything has to be spontaneous. So you're going to see that in yourself. It's going to, like I said, it's got to come from your heart. It's got to come from your center. It's got to come from your very being. It can't come from something that somebody told you to do and therefore you're doing it. It has to come from wisdom that you know from yourself. And therefore, when you know that, when you're confronted with these situations, you know this is either a situation where I surrender, or it's a situation where I have to do something very uncomfortable and stand up for myself, or do something else in a way that's going to evolve, that's going to teach me to come out of my comfort zone. So that's a way where I find out where we could bring everything. That's one lesson where we could see everything comes back into one place. So the last thing I want to talk about before we get to an actual practice that we could do is the last thing that I found in my book when I was looking for practices was when I found where I was looking for my basic state. And that's something that was the most powerful thing and something that we could work on together here. We're all reading spiritual books, we're all reading and looking for things, and it's tempted to think that all these things are foreign. These are mind states, foreign, away, and there's something else, there's something other. And if I could accomplish this or that, I could experience this other state, this otherness, this something else that's not here. And in the book one, I talk about this experience I had where I'm laying in bed and I'm, at this point in my life, I'm constantly meditating. There's no point in the day in meditating. I'm just meditating. Anytime I'm not with somebody, I'm just back to a constant state of meditation. And as I'm laying in bed, and it just occurred to me, I was curious. I was just, in a quick second, I was curious. I was like, wait, what is my basic natural state? Before thinking, before anything happens, before any movement happens, what is my basic natural state? And I just silently, just a child, like looked for it. And it was a flood of energy of being that's already there. We already have this well of being, of presence that's already there. It's our basic state. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a practice to where, oh, the reason I thought about this practice is isometric exercises. I don't know if anyone's ever done anything in stress management or anything like that, but there's an exercise called isometric exercises where you tense up a part of your body and then you relax it. And then that way you can come to know the address of what relaxation feels like. So if you're talking to someone and they're saying, I don't know what it feels like to be relaxed, the way you give them an address of what it feels like to be relaxed, you say, okay, let's take your hand and let's tense it up, real tense, and feel what it feels like. You see what that feels like? Now let's relax it. And let's see what that feels like. So by going back and forth between the tension and the non-tension, it takes somebody who thinks that they're not familiar with non-tension to realizing, oh, I actually am familiar with non-tension. I'm just so focused and identified with the tension, I didn't realize that I knew what non-tension was. So we have an exercise called isometric exercise where you literally go before tense, relax, tense, relax. So a practice that I just came up with, and I apologize, everybody's around me has had a cold this week and I managed to not get it, but I do have the symptoms. Oh boy. I forgot what I was talking about. All right, so what I want everybody to do is think about, first of all, whatever word is true for you. I wrote in my first book, when I had an experience where I had to surrender myself, the word I grasped onto was Buddha nature, because at the time I was reading a lot of Buddha nature. And let's say if I wanted to say the word God, and I say, okay, I trust in you, God, I trust in you, God. Maybe in my mind, I'm thinking, wait, what is God? And I don't really have a good idea of what God is. So I'm getting distracted. Or maybe if you say, okay, I want to, that word that I associate with, who I really am is stillness. But for you, you're confused between stillness and silence. That's what I'm saying. Whatever books you've read, forget whatever operative words they're using. Think about whatever word means something to you when you're looking at who you really are, your basic state. That's the word I want to use. I think that's the one thing in common behind all these words is just our basic state, who we are before anything happens, before thinking happens, before feelings happen, before anything arises. What is our basic experience? So the exercise that I want us to do right now is similar to the isometric exercise, where all of us, me included, we're going to take a few seconds to practice feeling, going back and forth between our still mind and our moving mind. So we'll go, and like I said, use whatever word you want. It could be still mind, it could be silent mind, it could be Buddha mind, whatever mind you want, whatever word you want to use, whatever resonates with you. But right now, let's go back and forth, and I'll guide you, when we stop, how much time we spend in each one. But let's start right now by all of us closing our eyes or leaving your eyes open. Everybody likes to meditate in different ways. By being aware of the moving mind. So let's start. I'm going to shut my mouth. As soon as I shut my mouth, we'll all just be aware of our moving mind. Let's just watch it. You don't have to try to make it move. It's going to move. So let's all go into our moving mind right now. And that's all the time you need. You see what it feels like to now to have the moving mind. So now we'll quickly go directly from the moving mind now to just your silent mind. And let's see what that feels like. Okay, that's enough time to feel what silence feels like. Now let's go back to the moving mind. And now back to the silent mind. Okay. Now I want you to come out of the silent mind and I want you to notice what didn't change between those two minds. What did not change? And whatever you notice that did not change, that's the bullseye. That's all we're looking for. What was consistent through the moving mind and the still mind? That's the unborn mind that I'm referring to. That's your ordinary mind. That's the unchanging mind. There's something unchanging, and then there's something else that's changing. You are the unchanging. So now let's once again go back to the moving mind. And now to the still mind. Now back to the moving mind. And coming out of the moving mind, notice what didn't change when you went from the still mind to the moving mind. That's it. There's something that's always there, whether you're still, whether you're moving, whether you're happy, whether you're sad. There is a sameness that's always there. There's an unchanging, underlying existence to everything. And that's all anybody's pointing to, is that unchanging. So there's nothing to attain. There's nothing extra to bring in. There's simply a redirecting your attention to back here, to the stillness that contains the moving. So the most important factor of all the different practices teachers could give you, whether, like I said, whether it's the power of now, whether it's looking for who you really are, silence, stillness, the only reason any of these practices are effective is because they're pointing you to the unchanging. That's who you are. It's nothing, but it's the unchanging. So the more you identify with the unchanging, the more you find your place in that, then you see the world as just movements and your body is along with it. Your body is no different than the world that's moving along with it. It's out there, it's observable. Your feelings are observable, your happiness is observable. It's not the real thing. That's not what you're looking for. You're not looking for happiness that's transitory. You're not even looking for peace that's transitory. You're looking for the unchanging. That's what you're really after, is just the unchanging. It's not good or bad. It's not happy or sad. It's not up or down. It's just our fundamental position or orientation of watching everything else that's happening. It's the end of everything. That's what I'm saying. This is the end of everything. And instead, what you have is you realize that you are the nothing for everything to be happening in. So if you take one thing away from this, it's just to remember that you are the unchanging, and to bring your mind back to the unchanging, and from the unchanging, you're a witness to the unchanging. And there's a couple other things I want to get on, but it's kind of switching subjects. So before I switch subjects, I want to open up the floor to questions and answers. If anybody has any questions about anything I talked about or practices, Gary, I already see one.
Mark, there were three people who had questions, and I said we would pause. We'd wait for you to finish, but if you want to take questions
Yes.
now.
Let's do it. Let's take questions. Yes.
Okay, so Lisa Martin was first, and then Hannah, and then Christine. So Lisa, if you have your question, if you still have it, you go first, and then Hannah, and then Christine, and then we have Eric. Okay.
Yeah, so it may be slightly irrelevant now. This has been great, Mark. Wow.
Thank you.
Very powerful. Very much my experience that has never had words. So right on, man. So one thing I was going to mention, though, in the very beginning, when you were talking about the three qualities to harness prior to working into practices, and you spoke about brutal honesty, which, I mean, that just couldn't be more on target. The only thing that came up about that, I was chatting with somebody else in the room about it briefly, was that can feel like effort. And yes and no, because if being brutally honest with yourself, this is the experience that happens here. If being brutally honest with yourself isn't happening, I'm not so sure that you can make it. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty certain you can't.
Yes.
Because there really isn't anyone here that can do that, whether
Yeah.
you believe it or not.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so
it's-
I just wanted to go ahead and say your comment. That's all I really had.
Thank you. I love it. And that's why, if you notice, it's not one thing. If you notice, I kept wrapping up brutal honesty with spontaneous and surrender all at the same time. You have to parse these out with words, but it's all three at the same time. You can't do brutal honesty without being spontaneous. You can't be spontaneous without brutal honesty. So that answered your question in there. The brutal honesty is / being spontaneous. There is no rule to yourself. I got to be brutal self-honesty. I got to be brutal self-honesty. That's an ism. That's now a belief. Now you're on a belief. You're on a thing. That's not it. It's three things all at once, and there's no word for it. So I have to break up this thing that has no word to say it has the quality of being brutally honesty at the same time of being spontaneous, and at the same time of being in a state of non-attachment surrendering. You see what I'm saying? So
I absolutely see exactly what you're saying. And there is a propensity to go towards, I need to do this. And so just was trying to clarify, because it's not that you didn't say that, but you are saying that now. And I think it's a really important point. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
No, and I'm glad you said that. I really appreciate you saying that, because now you're giving me an opportunity to say something that I didn't say, that I didn't emphasize enough, is those three words: brutal honesty, spontaneous, and surrender. They have to be as a triune. They can't be what she just pointed out. What she just pointed out is why none of these could be handled by themselves. Because if you just have it as a rule, I got to be brutally self-honest. Ironically, now you're not even being brutally self-honest, because it's a rule. It's not spontaneous. It's not coming from surrendering. It's coming from I believe if I'm self-honest, I'm going to achieve this goal. That's not it. It has to be a natural combination of brutal self-honesty, spontaneity, and surrendering all at once. And that doesn't have a word. Maybe it does have a word, and I just don't know it. But the word that I don't have, I have to break it up into three components. But as Lisa very pointedly or smartly pointed out, you can't have anything as a rule, no matter how smart that rule is. Even if you have a rule of saying, I'm not going to be attached to anything, or I'm not going to surrender. If that's just an ism or a rule, it's not spontaneous. It's not coming from your heart. It's not coming spontaneously. The word, everything has to be spontaneous. So if you're practicing spontaneously, then nothing you could be doing is doing wrong, because it's not based on an ism. It's not based on a thought, and I heard this once and I'm doing it because I think it should be done. It's spontaneous. In one moment, this is necessary. In the next moment, something else is necessary. It may not be surrendering. That's why I gave you the example with my wife. In that situation, it was not the surrender. If it was just about an ism and a belief and an ideology, go surrender, but it's not. It's got to be about the heart. It's got to be about being spontaneous. It's got to be about a place of surrendering and being brutally honest with yourself. But as she said, they have to be all three. Otherwise, it's just an ideology. It's an ism. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
Okay, Hannah's next. And Mark, how many questions do you want to take? Because Daryl's saying we want to get to the next point too. We don't want to.
No, don't worry. The next two, I only have two more things. They're not much. They're just things I already wrote in the book. They're not going to be nearly as long as that. It's probably only going to take about 5 minutes to say. So we're basically done.
Oh, we're good then. Okay, Hannah, and then Catherine, Eric, and Stefan. Okay, so Hannah, go ahead.
Okay, so I have a comment and a question. And hi, Mark. It's great to see you, and thank you. This is lovely. It's so bright. It has a bright, joyful quality, and I love that.
Could I interrupt you for 1 second, Hannah?
Yeah.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. It's nice to see you again. I talked with you before. I appreciate that. I'm glad you said that. I was going to say something today, and I completely forgot to say it, because in the preparation for this, as I'm talking to myself, I'm just thinking death. This is all about death and just kill yourself and gloom. And I'm thinking nobody's ever seen me before. So when I write these things, I must come off as like a horribly dark person where everything's about death and dying and killing yourself. So I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you could see me. I'm a perfectly happy person. And when I think about death, I'm thinking about it in glowing terms. We were dead a lot longer than we're here, and we're going to be dead a lot longer when we're gone. Death is our salvation. Death is who we are. So when I talk about death and darkness and all these things, I hope you could see me now in person. And we're even wearing a purple shirt. I'm a happy person. These things are light. I will say I'm both things at once. I'm an extremely dark guy, but dark doesn't necessarily mean unhappy. It could be brooding, and it could be, going inside, but it is a happy thing. So thank you, Hannah. I hope you don't mind me interrupting you. Go
Not
ahead.
at all. That's great. I appreciate it. And that leads to the comment. So your example of the suicide mission,
Yes.
of the kind of suffocating of, and what I wanted to give a concrete example of where that's happening in my life. There's been a lot of resistance around, but it's in my primary relationship, and for other people, it might be in their workplace or in relation to money or some specific thing. But here it's like, there's a moment in interaction with my partner where it relates to pride, but it's like, it's this desire to kind of, I wrote it down. It basically, there's this humility of not saying something, or of not buying into the story. And it does feel like a death, because it's like, it goes against everything in like generations of training of how to kind of hold the ground or be better than, or whatever version of it is. And it really does feel like something, it's like something's going wrong.
Yeah.
Like you're holding your head underwater or something, as you've said before.
Yeah.
Like, it does feel like this isn't right, and I need to say something. I basically need to create myself. And so that's the kind of death I'm seeing in a particular application. So I just want to say that, and then I had a question, a practical, technical question.
Okay, and before you go to that, I just want to add, you brought up a good word you reminded me of, which is counterintuitive. It's the reason I call it a suicide mission is it feels counterintuitive. We have something that we know that feels like we're coming out to be alive, to feel good, to feel relief. And we're always looking for that. This is counterintuitive, because this is taking your head and sticking it underwater and stuff. And it feels very counterintuitive to what we're usually doing, which is standing up for ourselves and building ourselves and creating ourselves. So it's very counterintuitive. And I like that word because I talked to you offline and I told you about Donald Hoffman. He's a cognitive psychologist that came up with a theory. I don't remember what the theory is called, but basically he thinks that the world's a virtual reality. And that we're just rendering the world, we're creating it with our mind, that all the world is a mind, and we're creating it with our mind. And this is what he learned. And this is based on evolutionary theory. It's based on biology, evolutionary theory, I don't know, biological evolutionary theory, and simulation theory. Thank you. Someone just wrote that. Thank you, David. And it's based on the fact that we get no fitness points for enlightenment. You get fitness points if you eat right, if you do good things, you're getting all these fitness points. But for this thing that we're talking about right here and right here only, you get no fitness points for. It's counterintuitive. The program does not want you to do it. It's like war games. Remember I was telling you about war games, how there's all these infinite commutations? It wants you to be lost in all these infinite possibilities. My way, you're this way, a little bit of art, a little bit of health, a little bit of this, a little bit of science. Everyone's trying different ways. The only way is to not play at all. And that's why you get no fitness points for enlightenment. This program doesn't want us to get enlightened. It wants us to keep churning out all these possibilities and fighting with ourselves and banging against us, coming up with all these ideas, but we do not get rewarded for enlightenment because it's counterintuitive. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great. I really appreciate it. I actually just read a book of his after we talked. So in terms of just relating to the straw man and the language thing, so in that same example, what is strongly conditioned to do is to explain myself. You know, if something is perceived as being selfish, let's say, like there's some sort of a judge or critical comment of, let's say something selfish, oh, you're going to take the last piece of pie. Well, you know, sort of something like that. There's such a strong condition to be like, oh, I just blah, blah, you know, that there is like, you know, drawing the head of the straw man or the arm of the straw man, and not doing that is like letting that other suggestion of selfishness hang and like be a possible, you know, just giving it space, which feels like, no, that's not true. That's not what I was doing. That's not real. You know, let me tell you what was real. So, okay. But when you talk about, you don't allow the words, I think I wrote this, let me just find the actual question because I did write it in the comments.
Oh, too much explaining.
Let's see. I'm going to ignore Stefan for a moment because I don't know what
I
that's
know,
about.
that's the problem.
Okay, so what is it? I can't find it. Oh, coming up to it.
Hannah, I think the question was, how do you ignore the words?
Yeah, so no words spoken out loud or no words spoken in the mind. Like, I'm just curious what you meant
The
technically.
second
about
one,
that.
in the mind. It's basically, I was watching my mind as a cesspool and it's just, you know, just moving, trying to position myself. And I know I couldn't stop it. I'm not trying to stop the ego. I'm not trying to stop the mind, but I was so sick of it. I was like, go ahead, mind, do your thing, protect yourself, build yourself, but no internal dialogue, no words. So you could come up with all these things, but no internal dialogue. So it's just feelings. It's just the tension is there and the moving's there, but it's not expressing itself through dialogue. And it's a really good way to do it because you're not stopping it. You're not trying to impede your thoughts. You're just saying, go ahead, mind, move. No words though.
So basically it's because sometimes the words just go, blah, blah, blah. They just go by. Is it just not engaging that?
Yeah, you're right, because I can't control whether words come up. Actually, I never thought about that, but you're right. I don't know how, but for some reason, when I said that, when I intended no more words, no words were coming up, or if they were, I wouldn't pay attention to them. It really comes back to, which I am going to get back to in that second thing, is just not following it. It's really important. It's more important than anything to allow for all these things to happen. There's never going to be a time where thoughts don't happen, ego doesn't happen, identifying doesn't happen. Whatever things that the spiritual people are trying to tell you to not do and not happen, there's no way, it's irrelevant. I shouldn't say there's no way. It's irrelevant whether these things are happening or not. The only thing that's important is whether you're following them or not. That's
Right.
the only important thing, is if you're following them.
And in a way, it's not so much different in the example with a, you know, in the partnership of a comment made outside, just don't reply. Comment
Okay.
made, "Leep, leep, leep," you know,
Yeah.
just let that be there, but not
Yeah,
go with it.
I wanted to touch on that actually, if you don't mind, just because I find it something so important, probably the most important thing. When I went to the Monroe Institute, the guy who gave a talk there, he was the agent number one for the Stargate program, who would do the remote viewing for the CIA. He gave a piece of advice to just say, never defend yourself, because it takes so much energy. And when you just said that, you reminded me of something so important. What you were feeling there is something that I learned, and it's probably the most important thing. The one piece of advice that guy gave me, it's always rung with me, was just to simply never defend yourself, because it's a waste of energy. And what you're going to find, though, is if you really, really go into that practice of never defending yourself, you're going to find out that what you were experiencing in that story that you just told me, that's actually, you were noticing a subtle impulse to defend yourself. Just, you wanted to explain yourself. You wanted it to be known what was really going on. You did not want it to be a mystery where someone walked away and they possibly had a misunderstanding of who Hannah is. And I know the difficulty about that. I know the difficulty of that, but that is the practice of just not defending yourself, of going into life and just and here's a way to make it easier. This is a way for me to make it easier to not defend yourself in life, to go through life and having people have misperceptions of you, people misunderstanding you, people thinking things of you, and being able to live with it. It has to come from something spontaneous and something from your center that you know. It can't come from me telling you, you need to do this, and then you do it because you think, oh, that sounds smart. Maybe if I do it, it'll work. It has to come from your center. And I want to tell you about how it came from my center, what you're talking about. Basically, I just came to the realization that all of us, me, you, everybody here, we're all going to live our lives and we're going to die never knowing other people's stories or what they really thought or what was really inside their heads and what was really going on. So you're already not going to get the satisfaction. Even if you sat there and try to explain to every single person what's really in your head, they're still going to misperceive you. They're still going to see it through their filter. They're still going to think you're a liar. You're never going to get it. So I'm not trying to tell you to stop defending yourself because it's a pious thing, it's a smart thing. I'm just telling you it's hopeless. You can't do it. I know what you're trying to do because I try to do it too. We all have these same impulses. We don't want to be misunderstood. We want people to see us in the right way. We want all these things. And for me, I don't feel like that at all anymore. My new life, the way I go through life now, instead, I go through life where all my words and all my interactions, I think of them being as economical and efficient. So I end my conversations with, when I'm talking with someone, I'm not thinking, oh, I want to clear this up so they get it. I'm really thinking each sentence that I say is just going to make this conversation make that much more longer and it's going to get wrapped up. We're going to get further away from where you are. So I just look at things of being efficient and wrap it up, say, oh, great, I understand. And then we're done. Because I'm no longer operating under the impression that I could get people to see what's in my mind so I could get them to understand me. I realize it's a fruitless mission. And now I'm just very economical and efficient with my conversations. And I'm just like, oh, okay, I get it. I learned from you and we're done. And I'm no longer trying to get people to see who I am. And not because, like I said, because it's a decision or it's pious or it's a smart thing. It's only because it's fruitless. No one's ever going to see who you are. No one's ever going to know what's in your mind. They're not going to understand it. It's fruitless. And it's just more economical to just get back to where you were before you were having that conversation in the first place. It's pointless. Most things in life I'm finding out, it's all vaporous. All the conversations people are having, it's all meaningless and it's all vapor. And for me, my goal is to end the conversation and get back to what I was doing in the first place. So my words are always efficient and to shut down the conversation as soon as possible to get back to what we're doing. My thing is I'm always moving straight. I'm going straight. If we're talking about something, I want to get there. I don't like to get stuck on sidetracks. And I notice that most conversations are all vapor. They don't go anywhere. Nothing practically is coming out of this conversation where something concrete is going to come out of it. It's all vapor. You're talking about your opinions. I'm talking about mine, and nothing comes out of it. It's vapor. It's a waste of energy. And I don't engage in that. I just don't. But anyway, I want to come back to that thing. I know what you're talking about. it's a form of want to defend yourself. You want to define, maybe not defend yourself, but you want to define yourself. You want to define yourself, and you want to know you want people to know who you are and what your thoughts. Just give up. No one's ever going to get it. They're never going to know you. You're never going to get your point. Just give up and stay straight. Your husband's not going to get it. No points are worth belaboring. Some are. And again, it's spontaneous. This doesn't have to be a rule or an ism. Sometimes you're going to find me going through great efforts to say, no, it's really important that you get this. You know what I mean? But for the most part, the general rule is just you're finding yourself. Here I am, and I'm noticing myself. I'm trying to define myself to this person so this person knows who I am. I don't need that anymore. I just don't need it. And it spontaneously goes away because from the heart, from the very center, you've lost that interest because you've had an insight. You had an actual insight that makes you realize no one's ever going to get me. And therefore, I spontaneously have no desire to be understood anymore. All right, thank you. No, I interrupted you, Hannah. I'm sorry. Go back to your last point.
Oh, no, that's it.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Hannah. That was great. Thank you for giving me an opportunity. That's something I like to say, but you gave me an opportunity.
Okay, and now Catherine Cooley, then Eric, Stefan, and Aryeh. Catherine, you're on.
Thank you. I'm just enjoying the image of the world, your world, Mark, with all the vaporous conversations gone. And the people kind of wondering what that's about, the people around you.
Oh, it's interesting. I'll get into that later, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. One, I think you answered in your answer to Hannah about like when you said that you stopped the words, you know, and so wondering what that was. So I get it. It's more about like stopping the engagement.
Well, it's not that, you know what though? Maybe I should put this into more nuance. I'm so thankful for both of you guys bringing up these questions. Every question you bring, I'm so thankful because you invite me to dig deeper into what I'm saying. And you just made me realize I didn't say something completely. So this is it. All right. So there's two things. The internal dialogue. All right. So I talk about two things. One, about allowing thoughts to come, to not try to stop them. Maybe not in that talk, but the talk I'm about to do now. I'm not wanting to be in a what they call like a Zen police. I'm saying no thoughts, no silence, everything's bad. That's not the school of thought that I come from. The school of thought that I come from is thoughts that happen are ornaments of the mind, and they're meant to rise and disappear on their own. They're not meant to be squashed. They're not meant to be seen as bad. They're natural ordinance of the mind that rise and go away of their own, and you're just not to attach to them. So I have a different attitude towards thinking that maybe a lot of other people do. So when I'm talking about that specific thing, when I said, okay, mind, go ahead and do your worst, do your ego, do your thing, but no internal dialogue. I'm not, in that particular point, I'm not given the point of saying, let thoughts come, let thoughts go. That's a different instruction. You're right. Now you're forcing me to say something that I haven't said before, adding a nuance that I haven't added. With that particular exercise, what I was doing, so I'm watching the mind and I'm allowing thoughts to come up. But, okay, so here's okay, so now I'm seeing what it looks like in slow motion. So I'm watching my mind, I'm allowing the thoughts to come up, but I'm putting an extra qualification in my mind saying, okay, I'm waiting for the thought. I'm almost anticipating the thought, but as I'm waiting, anticipating it, I want it to come through, but not in words. Only the energy that's going to be there. The energy could be dissatisfied. The energy could be angry, whatever the energy is that's behind those words of saying, oh, look what your boss did to you at work. Look at all these. The energy could still be there, but not in the actual words of, oh, can you believe your boss did that to you? Or can you believe that happened? So allow the energy to happen, but allow the energy to happen without the internal dialogue of why would my boss say that? So allow the feeling of why would my boss say that, but not with the internal dialogue. And as I said that out loud, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, you can't control whether internal dialogue comes up or not. It just comes up. And you're absolutely right. So I guess what I'm talking about is an expectation. As you're watching your mind and you're saying thoughts are going to come up, you're saying, I'm going to be receptive to these thoughts, but I'm watching for energy and feelings and not for the words. So I think that's really what I'm watching for is the energy. What I'm really paying attention for is for the energy and not the words. I hope that's a little bit more clear.
I think so. I think what it is that you're choosing where to put your focus, and you're specifically choosing in the moment spontaneously to shift from why did my boss say that thought to just the energy of it,
Yeah,
or to
that's
the
it.
emotions, maybe the body sensations.
You're
and just-
skipping a step. Exactly. It's more direct. Anything that you could do to skip steps and get it more direct, like, okay, I just want to feel this directly. I don't need the words. I just want to feel whatever my brain wants to feel. It's obviously dissatisfied. It's obviously trying to work something out. I'm not trying to stop it, but I'm trying not to take it as seriously and draw that stick man. So go ahead and tell me how you're feeling, but not in words. Tell me in energy. So thank you.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because I think well, I don't know, maybe different people would say that, because some people say that all those sensations of like the feeling of the anger or whatever about the boss kind of does get locked in the body. But then others say if you just like express it and witness it, then those emotions do dissipate.
Yeah.
And so maybe it is more of a straight path to just dissipate the energy of it than to play with the stick man details.
I like it. I like that. Yes, I like that.
Yeah, that makes
Because you know why? Because it's more direct. You're talking about the actual energy. All we are is energy interacting with other energy. And then we put words on these energies so we could have a conversation so you could understand what we're talking about. But the direct experience is just these energies, this tension.
yeah.
So thank you. I wouldn't have said that if you didn't dig deeper. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then there was an additional piece. Let me flip back to it. I had one more question in there. Oh yeah, it was when you gave that example with your wife and you were saying that, go past your comfort zone. It's good exercise. What occurred to me in that moment is, aren't we then falling back into that self-improvement pit?
Yeah, okay, absolutely right. But once again, that's why we got to have the preamble at the beginning. You can't have, everything's got to be brutal self-honesty. It's got to be spontaneous, but that means no rules and surrendering. So basically, you're right. There can't be any rules. You can't have anything to where you're saying, all these are just guidelines to help you go there. But the minute you have a rule, you're never going to get anywhere, because all these rules are meant to be broken. Everything has a situation. All these rules are meant for, you got to think, all the books and teachings that have ever been written were written one at a time for specific situations. Then they wrote it down and it became in a book, and now we're looking at it as if that's for our situation. So all these different things, everything's situational, everything is spontaneous. So to go back to your thing about, yes, okay, to go back about effort or working on yourself, once again, spontaneous. So in Dzogchen Shen would say, work on yourself, don't work on yourself, no matter. That's the essence of it. There is no rule. There's nothing you could say where you say, don't work on yourself, or surrender. Surrender, don't surrender, no matter. Work on yourself, don't work on yourself, no matter. Everything, it does not matter. That's where the spontaneity comes from. Every situation is demanding of a moment, and you there to ride for the moment. There can be no isms. There can't be any rules. But I understand the rules. I understand why everybody would say, don't work on yourself. Or I understand why everybody would say everything in the history of time, but you can't be attached to any one of them. Not a single one. Anything I've said here tonight, you can't attach to, because there's going to be a circumstance to where spontaneously you should be doing something differently than whatever I happen to talk about. So yeah, absolutely. Once again, the thing about expanding your comfort zone and standing up for yourself, that's what the situation calls for. Spontaneously, in your heart, and there is no right or wrong. You're going to die, and no one's ever going to tell you you were right or wrong. That's it. Your life is your koan, and you're slowly unsolving it. And with that brutal honesty and surrendering and not attachment to rules, you're going to work through life in a wiggly path. You're forging your own path. There is no right way. So yeah, you're right. Sometimes you're what do you call it? You're improving yourself or whatever, whatever. Because put it this way, if you wanted to just make it an ism or a thing you shouldn't be trying to improve yourself, then why is anybody watching what foods they eat or things like that? It shouldn't be in the mind. Nothing should be in the mind of an idea. It's all got to be, like I said, spontaneous, brutally self-honest, and in an open of surrendering. So I'll acknowledge absolutely yes, that's a form of self-improvement, and it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, okay, now Eric, and then Stefan, and then we've got Aryeh, and Barbara is up after Aryeh.
Yeah, hi, Mark. Thank you for coming here. I feel myself resonating with a lot that you're saying. It's just one thing I'm sort of struggling with a bit, and that is this idea that you mentioned you had a want, that you wanted to give up all your wants. And once you've done that, there still seems to be like a need for a want, because if you have like a mission in life, or you want to write a book or something, you would think you need to want to do that, or you have a preference, you want to drink Coke instead of Pepsi, maybe. Or how would you explain that?
I would say that wants and desires, they happen spontaneously. If you look at the diagram that I showed with the black part on the bottom and the white part on top, you're both things at the same time. You're not just one of them. You're both things at the same time. And what you're looking at is your thoughts and your actions and your desires. Those things happen. Your thoughts happen, desire, all these things happening, but you're watching them. You're not them. So it's not to say that all these things are going to come to an end. You're just watching them from the complete proper perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just like, if you say you achieved the goal, that you have eliminated all your wants, then should you just like sit in a meditative position until you starve to death? It's like,
wouldn't that be a want? Would that be a want? Why wouldn't that be a want? How's that any different? How's sitting meditating doing anything different than what we're doing now?
oh yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah. No, I think your explanations makes perfect sense. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. Yeah, whatever you do, hey, I know I get what you're saying. You're saying, I talked about my last desire. I had a desire to not desire anything. What I was talking about is I was sick of not feeling complete. I was sick of feeling like I needed something else to feel complete. So now you're right. I want, I'm talking to you. I want this. I have a pen I'm about to pick up. I'm going to want that. I have water. I'm about to want a tissue. So yeah, we have all these wants and everything, but I think that's different than the desire that I was talking about. I was talking about a sense of feeling like I needed something. And yeah, you're right. I could say I need the pen, I need the tissue, I need the water. So you're right. These are words, and we want to go beyond the energy of there's a feeling of lack. Like, put it this way, right now, you're going to get thirsty and you're going to drink a drink of water. But that's not the same thing of let's say you were having a problem with you didn't have a job and you're like, oh my God, I don't have a job. I need money. I really need this. And you're really into desiring it. That's a little bit different than you, without even thinking about it, you want some water and you quickly pick it up and you drink it. You see what I'm saying? There's going to be wants. You could call anything in your life a want. What I was specifically talking about was a desire. I was living in a place where I wouldn't feel complete. I wouldn't feel like I was done until I had this certain thing. And now I don't feel that about the pen or the water. You know, I want them, but there's no sense of desire for them. And I hope that makes sense, because I know these are very subtle words. The only thing I could say is just don't be attached to any words in particular. You know, ask questions like you're doing just right now to get more clarification on words that people are using, because I understand it's confusing. And I hope that helped.
I mean, it seems like what you're saying is, before all of this, then you were expecting certain things to make you feel complete and happy.
Yes, sir.
And it's like the abandoning of that and finding what actually did. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. It's the else. It's the else. The whole thing is the else. The whole reason I'm talking about giving it or surrendering or giving up my desires was the else. I was looking for something else. So there's just an energy behind that of just not feeling complete. There's just an energy of feeling like you're not complete. You're not who you are. You're not internally satisfied. And like I said, I know once again with words, we could go to the point where at one point I'm going to want water. I'm going to want all these things, but and maybe I should spend time thinking about better words. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about sensing a sense of completion, that you're not complete until you get it. And that's what I lost. I don't feel like I'm not going to be complete if I don't have the water. I just have a spontaneous urge to drink the water. I want the water. And it's okay to want it. Yeah, you know what it is? It's wanting without attachment. That's what, maybe, thank you, Eric. Maybe that's what you helped me to put there. It's okay to want just without attachment and neediness and this whole thing of a desperation behind it. Just a gentle wanting, a gentle spontaneous, I want this, I want that, is different than a feeling like I need this. So I think that's a little bit better.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
now, and speaking of brutal honesty, we now have Stefan, followed by Aryeh and Barbara Bryce.
Yes, I can see the smile on Hannah's face, so she's already excited about what I'm going to say. So I came late, I'm sorry, but to me, the whole thing about everything is there are no truths and stuff. I honestly have to say, there are just some truths that are more true than others, and to me, I heard you talking about isometric exercise, for example, and I'm not sure if I missed something because I came late, but actually I'm doing a lot of isometric exercise, and actually it's, when you're doing it with dumbbells and there is a muscle movement, isometric exercise is basically clenching biceps and triceps together. So it's a very, very good exercise. And I'm doing this a lot, to kind of simulate contraction and releasing. It's really, really great. But it's still, to me, your kind of definition of something sounded a little wrong. So I didn't really want it to be a smart ass or something and say something. But, I think it's, sometimes being accurate, and I oftentimes find this in this, and, there's a thing about science, right? Most people, specifically in this community says, science is a belief system. I don't think this is actually true. To me, science in a way is the process of testing your assumption. Basically, oh, Lisa is loving it. Basically like self-inquiry, on a very specific level, really doing experiments. Don't try to rely too much on your bias and your internal, oh, I'm having the truth or something. So I think, and the way how you talk usually, Mark, I think you have a very good kind of balance between those kind of the relative and absolute truth or something. So maybe you can talk about this a little bit. And I'm sorry that your website is still down. I don't know why your domain is still down. I don't know. I'm still, if you need some help.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. Yeah, actually, I did lose that website that I had, but I have a new website up now. It's still, I'm working with the guy, but it's actually there. You could go there, but it's not complete, but something will show up. It's called thisawarespace.com. And I'm going to start doing podcasts. I'm going to have a discussion board if anybody wants to have any questions or anything like that. But that is up. It's not ready yet. The message board isn't set up, but I did start up with a new website. So I will have that. But I'm not quite sure. Could you distill what you want me to speak on a little bit into a sentence or two? Because
yeah. Well, the thing about, oftentimes, and the whole Advaita thing, there is no truth or something. I mean, if you don't have, how do you distinguish basically your sense of complete, your inner experience in navigating the world? I mean, other people seem to have their truths and stuff, and they're oftentimes, very contradictory, when you interact with people, right?
Okay.
In a sense.
Okay. I think I know what you're saying. So you're saying with my truth that I know, since it's so contradictory to the world, how do I go into the world and deal with people like at my work and everything?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that question. That's a very good question. Well, I could tell you how I've done it my whole life until now has been faking, lying, deceiving, basically pretending. That's the way I've lived my life until now. No one knows anything about me, zero. That's how I've done it until now. I don't talk about it. I don't talk about my life. And so people around me, I've just always been a mystery. People have always called me out, when I'm trying to pretend who I am. They, see, I have nicknames like Yoda or Little Buddha and things like that, even though people don't know who I am. So I could tell you in the past, I would just, like I said, I would pretend to be a different person. I would have what do you call it? A personality. Like everybody see the Big Lebowski, the dude in the Big Lebowski.
Yes.
I
one
was
of my
exactly
favorite
that
movies.
guy. I would just go in my life pretending I'm that guy. I'm just a doofus going through life. I don't know nothing. I'm just a bumbling idiot. And I felt like that was easier to go through life. I felt like people, it was just easier. So, but anyway, so to answer your question, that's how I used to go through life. This year has been completely different, as with this talk. So for most of my life, I hid from the world. I just, like going back to like what Hannah said, I gave up on trying to explain myself to people, to try to let people know who I am. I just became much more efficient and economical to just go straight with what I'm doing and, deal with questions and answers as they come up and then go right back to who I am. So,
Awesome.
so
Thanks.
as I went through life, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I feel like I was withholding myself. I was not sharing myself. I was not being myself. Nobody ever knew who I was, ever. Even in my family, to the point. It was easier to just go through life putting up a facade just so I could keep coming back to my practice. But now, this last year, or 2 years, I'm not sure how long it's been, I just had an epiphany where something changed and I no longer want to be withholding. I want to share of myself. I want to share, just be myself. I don't want to withhold. I guess it's not that I want to do anything. I just don't want to withhold, which is a negative action, not necessarily an action, kind of a non-action. So now in my work, I'm slowly, with one person at a time. I've even showed 3 people my book now. I'm starting to little by little show people who I am and talk for real and talk like I'm talking to you now. And it hasn't been easy, to be honest with you, because it makes me feel more alien, to be honest with you. The more I talk to people, the more it makes me feel like my perception of life, the way I operate, like the way I see life, my physical orientation to life is so vastly different, so alien to everybody, that there's so many things that I take for granted and just project on other people that I don't realize until I start talking to other people. And it's the gulf between my experience in life and other people's is the difference between night and day. And I've noticed, especially with this conference, with developing this talk for you guys, I take everything for granted. Since I don't talk to people, you guys have a group, you talk to people, I just project that everyone in the world is like me and thinks like me and understands the way I do. So I don't say a lot of things because I just assume that people are seeing it the way I do, which is why I want to go back and rewrite those books and expand upon them.
Oh, wow.
Like hundreds of pages. Because like a lot of the things I wrote in the books, I would just say one paragraph. And that paragraph needs a whole book of expanding, simply because I project that you guys are understanding what I say if I say just one sentence or one paragraph. And I think Lisa, Hannah, and somebody else, I forget who else, was showing that I'm not saying things clearly. I could just blurt out, hey, by the way, don't follow your internal dialogue and say no words and think you guys are hearing what I'm saying, but you're not. So this is a learning curve for me. I'm learning now that I have to talk a lot more. I have to explain myself, that I have to, I can't take for granted that people are experiencing the world the same way that I am. So
I love that, Mark. I really honestly, I really do love that, because I oftentimes experience the complete opposite, and especially people who have some sort of sense of accomplishment or whatever, right? Or awakening. So yeah, And it's great that it's on record, actually. So
Thank you,
thanks.
Steph. Thank you, Stefan. I appreciate that. Go ahead, Gary.
Hey, guys, we're kind of running out of time. I promised David we keep it to 2 hours under. We have 2 more questions, Aryeh and Barbara, and then Mark, I know you have some closing. You said you had about 5 minutes or 10 minutes more.
Yeah.
So let's just do 2 more questions and then Mark's closing remarks. And then thanks, everybody. So Aryeh.
Okay,
Aryeh is not there. We can go right to Barbara.
I'm here. I'm here.
Hi there.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much. It was a very good talk and very beneficial for me. I still have a question about what's the true nature, and you defined it by finding the things that is not changing, that does not change. And I want to know, how do you know that it doesn't change? Maybe it doesn't change for your length of life, but it will change in the next moment. I think it's really a bad definition. Sorry to say that, but
Is your question, is your question, how do I know that something is unchanging?
yes, yes.
It's a good question. I think in the moment of the experiencing it, when you're, how do we know the difference between something that's changing and unchanging?
Yes.
Huh. All right, let me think about that. The difference between changing and unchanging.
Yeah, it's just a matter of pace, the speed of change.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Do you sense a sameness throughout everything?
Only when I'm not thinking about it. When I
Okay.
think about it, I know there is no sameness.
Okay, so I think the same way that you know the difference between the sameness and the unsameness is the same way that I know the unchanging and the changing. It's basically the same thing, just a different word. So the same way that you could know the difference between sameness and not being the same, whatever faculty you use, that's the faculty that I use to know the difference between the changing and the unchanging. It's no different than the same and sameness.
But it's not logical. If you didn't live forever, so you are not you don't have the infinite time to verify that things are unchanging. Okay. So.
Correct. And just like we don't have the time to verify if something is the same or not, but yet we know when things are the same. Correct?
Only if it's a different name for the same thing. Otherwise, they're not the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to help you with, like an address, like something that you could know something that I'm talking about when I'm talking about the unchanging. And so I guess that's why I'm focusing on your word of the sameness, because it sounds like the closest thing to what I'm talking about in terms of something being the unchanging. And I guess the reason I'm having a hard time is because unchanging seems to be like a self-definition. So I'm having a hard time of defining something, because I think all I would do is be able to come up with like a thesaurus, like a, what's it called? Similes to unchanging. I think the only thing I'd be able to do is to come up with different words that are similar to unchanging. I don't know how I could say with words what the unchanging is without using other words that are just similar to unchanging.
Something would be unchanging if it does not depend on anything else. But
and that's what, exactly. So what is the one thing that's not depending upon anything else? Is this
nothing? Nothing.
Okay.
Everything depends on something else.
Oh, okay. So no thing is the space that this is happening. Is this no thing, or is the space that's happening? Is this something? Is it something, or is it no thing? The space that these words are happening in right now.
Everything is a thing. Okay, except okay, the no thing is more of a concept, but it's not. I don't know. I don't have an experience of it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, Ari. We'll go ahead and let that last question come out, but thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Barbara, last question.
Okay, no pressure. Actually, my question is about that same part of your discussion, the isometrics. And you were asking us to identify a flood, a natural state of being as being kind of a flood of energy. And I have an experience of that when there's a place I go to, which is, it has no words and no thoughts and no energy. I mean, and lots of energy. And it's almost like a flow of some kind, a flow of energy. But when I went back and forth between that and the active mind, the thing that seemed to me that was not changing was my consciousness. Consciousness was aware of the source of energy and of the active mind. And so I just wondered if you had a couple more words that you could say, if there was a difference.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, I think you hit the nail on the head. And of course, everybody uses words differently, consciousness or awareness. Typically, from what I've read, is I associate awareness. Let's start with consciousness. When I think of consciousness, I think of consciousness of something. So whenever I think of being consciousness, I think of being conscious of something. Whereas awareness, I use that in two ways. There's either just undifferentiated awareness of nothing, or awareness of something, which is consciousness. So to get to your question about the isometric exercises and the unchanging, consciousness, yes, okay. So what is there, what is the same that you're sensing is the consciousness. So consciousness has two modes though. There's consciousness, and now I'm going from awareness to consciousness because that's the word you're using, but I'm going to use it in the word that you understand it. So now I'm going to use the word consciousness has two modes. Consciousness could either just be conscious of nothing, or consciousness could be conscious of something. So when I was taking you between those two exercises, basically what I was just showing you was the difference between consciousness alone, consciousness of nothing, and then consciousness of something. But what's the same between those two things is consciousness. So consciousness has two modes. There's consciousness by itself, and there's consciousness of something. And the sameness between those two, the unchanging between those two, is consciousness itself. So what I was trying to walk you through in this experience is to show you the unchanging. Consciousness is there, even if you're unconscious. And that's the only reason why I like to use the word awareness instead of consciousness, because consciousness is, from what I've read, it's generally associated with consciousness of. But I know I've seen like titled of books, I think Nisargadatta saying consciousness is all there is. So if somebody is saying consciousness is all there is, then they're using the word consciousness in the way that I'm using the word awareness. And I'm one that's super not attached to words. I'll go with whatever word anybody's using. So going back to you, I'd say what you're discovering, what you're telling me is there's consciousness and there's also consciousness of. And what I'm saying is the common denominator, the unchanging, is consciousness itself. That's never not there, even if it's not conscious of anything. And when I was looking for my basic state, that's what I basically found, just consciousness, not even consciousness of anything, just this energy, just this, I compared it once to like when you light a lighter, that gassy feeling, that's for some reason that popped in my mind, just a feeling of flowing, the same constant flowing of energy. So you did me a favor, thank you. You pointed out the difference between consciousness and consciousness of, and the one commonality between them is consciousness itself. It never stops. Even if you're not conscious of something, there's still consciousness. That remains. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's exactly what I was hoping.
Thank you. And by the way, you're really going to love that. My third book really gets into that. It really gets into the minutia of all these subtle differences between something that's not different. Matter of fact, one fun thing I have is there is 3 definitions of nothing. So going back to what Ari was talking about, he's talking about nothing. We could talk about nothing, but nothing has 3 different dimensions. And just real quick, I'll say there's nothing. There's just simply nothing. But then there's nothing becoming attracted to itself, which is still nothing because it's no thing. It's a verb, it's attraction. So even attraction to itself is not a thing. So you have nothing, and then you have the action of nothing, which is still no thing. And then the result of this attraction from awareness to itself becomes awareness of awareness, which is again, still nothing because it's awareness of nothing, but taking it as something. So we could talk about nothing, but there's all kinds of different dimensions of nothing. It's not simply just nothing, but that's in my third book. So real quick, because I see the clock ticking, we got about 1 minute. I was just going to say the last thing I wanted to say that I wrote about in my second book was in separate from the practice that I just told you was I wrote in my book that I thought 3 quotes that I heard from the Buddhist religion could have been my religion, The first one is simply don't follow it. And that comes back to what we were talking about before about the spontaneous and don't get attached to any teaching. Don't get attached to having no thoughts. Thoughts are okay, identifications, anything anyone ever told you that is not okay, I feel it's okay. They're ornaments of the mind. They want to rise and they want to go away on their own. And the only thing you could do is to keep them there. So anything that happens in your mind is okay. It wants to leave. You're watching the thoughts leaving your mind, and all you're doing by engaging them is keeping them there. And now it's like trying to still the water by throwing your hands into the water and trying to make it still. You're just making more ripples. So the first one is just don't follow it. Anything that, whatever thoughts are coming up, just don't follow it. But more importantly, if thoughts do come up, just don't follow that. But if you do follow that, then simply don't follow that. And even if you do follow that, just don't follow that. And that's the practice. You could never go wrong. It's never too late to dissolve that little stick man, no matter how far it gets along, just don't follow it. Whatever point you realize, just don't follow it. The second quote was, remember to remember when you remember. That's basically to remember that thing. So now you're going to go through life and you're going to, get called into all different things. But the minute you remember, like, oh, that's right. Now I remember my agenda. Now I'm going back to who I am. I'm playing a bigger game than what people are playing. And I'm going back to remembering who I really am. And then the third one is, if you're on the path and you get off the path and you get back on the path, you were never off the path in the first place. What that's basically telling you is part of the path is seeming to get off the path and get off the path. And the takeaway for me is that we are a parentheses in stillness, not the other way around. Everything is stillness and silence, and our life is a tiny little parentheses in silence and stillness, not the other way around. It's not like we have a life and then within our life we have little moments of silence and stillness. It's really the opposite. We are a tiny little parenthetic event in emptiness. And that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Those were the 3 things. So thank you, everybody.
Hey, beautiful, Mark. Thank you. The second, I don't know, the second session was even greater than the first one, it seems, but who remembers? Thanks, everybody, for showing up. We're going to stop the recording right now because this is the official end, but if people want to hang out, it's up to them. Okay, thanks again, Mark, and thanks, everybody, for showing up.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
It
It was my
great.
pleasure.